Hello and welcome to the third episode of Mole in Space, your Starfield podcast, live from New Atlantis, as you can see, literally live because I'm actually also recording this live. And what is that hairstyle? Holy moly. But welcome in, welcome in. Yeah, I'm also recording this live in my stream, so chat is also here with you. And this is a little bit of a special episode because it is the early access of Starfield. Now, before you are getting worried that I'm starting to showcase some spoilers or I'm going into the nitty gritty of like the story and whatnot, there will be no spoilers in this podcast. Yep, this will be completely spoiler free because we have so many other things to talk about which are just gameplay relevant that I don't have to mention anything which is story related. Like, even when it comes to like gameplay stuff, I don't have to go into the story. So this is 100% spoiler free. So you can just watch this and you can enjoy it. Yeah. So with that said, let's talk about Starfield. Oh boy. Is it good? Is probably the question everyone has on their mind. And the answer to that is yes, if you like Bethesda games. If you don't like Bethesda games and you find them pretty dull and not interesting, then I don't think that Starfield will add anything new to the formula. It is through and through what makes Bethesda games great, or, well, depending on who you ask, not so great, right? Like, they have their quirks, like 100%, they have their issues. What I can say is, there are bugs in the game. There are glitches. We already had some. I actually have like a react or like a little YouTube short on this channel if you want to check it out. It's kind of funny. Like, yes, there are bugs, there are glitches in the game, but I have to say, with the scale we are dealing here with and the issues we know from Bethesda games, man, I think this is the most bug-free episode, or bug-free, not episode, but most bug-free game we have ever gotten from Bethesda. Like, it even runs well. I have mostly 60 FPS. There are some ditches sometimes here and there where something is being loaded in or something, but it's a rare occurrence. Like, seriously, I'm talking about FPS drop maybe once an hour for like a second, right? And nobody's really noticing that. I'm running this, by the way, with for everyone who's interested, I'm running this at 4040p and everything is cranked up to the max. I do run DLSS 2 though. And if you're like, wait a minute, DLSS is not in the game. Yes, there's a mod for bringing DLSS into the game. It's pretty easy to install. It took me 5 minutes, and I'm running DLSS 2. So this is not FSR, what you're seeing here. This is DLSS. Because let's be honest here, DLSS 2 is still better than FSR 2. We will see how that changes with FSR 3 and how that will go. But it runs great. I have 60 with my system. I'm also streaming at the same time. I'm also recording at the same time. So I'm putting a lot of like extra workload on my PC. I think I have also my stream running in the background at full HD. So there's another strain on the system. And it just runs smoothly. So good job on that. Pretty happy. And again, from a technical perspective, this is the best Bethesda game we ever had. I would go so far to say it's in the state of Fallout / Skyrim now. Right? If you were buying Skyrim, if you were buying Fallout, and you were buying the non-modded versions, right? You're not downloading any community patches or anything. That's basically the state this game is in. And it works pretty well. It works pretty well. Again, there are some weird glitches here and there. most of the time they have been more on the funny side. I've seen a pretty annoying glitch with another content creator who had issues with reloading games. Like, he died at a certain fight, and he had to reload multiple times, till at some point his save files were gone. His last saves were gone, so he was like panicking, he was screaming, and it turns out it was a visible bug. So he just had to restart the game. His save files were still there. You could just continue. But believe me, the panic was palpable, to say the least. I mean, I would probably panic pretty much when my save files disappear. Oh yeah, the game is doing that when it's turning the camera at some point. Weird. It's now doing the spinny spin the whole time. But so far, I can definitely say the game has been good. You know, like, I'm feeling the game, I'm enjoying the game, and let's talk about gameplay. I think this is the perfect time to talk about gameplay and how I feel about it. There is a major disappointment for me. And this is an overarching disappointment. Like, this is not a specific thing. There are multiple specific things I'm very disappointed in. But what I'm talking about is like an overarching feeling with the game. And there is a disappointment here. I think for a game which came out, what now? 7 years after the last Bethesda game. Yes, I'm not counting Fallout 76 because that was just modded Fallout 4. let's not kid ourselves. That was not a new Bethesda game. It used the same engine, it used the same systems. It was just Fallout 4 with microtransactions and multiplayer slapped on it, right? And then some changes to the balance. But it wasn't a new game. It wasn't the next step into the Bethesda game. And so, after Fallout 4, it's now 7 years. I have to say I'm really disappointed on how much hasn't changed. A lot of the weak spots Bethesda had for years are still there. It's the same weaknesses they had in Skyrim, in Oblivion, in Morrowind, in Fallout 3, and Fallout 4. And you would have thought after 7 years they would finally try to tackle those weak spots they have. And they didn't. And we will talk about those weak spots if you're like, huh, what type of weak spots? We're getting to that. I swear, we're getting to that. But I would have just hoped for a little bit more with new systems in place. They definitely enhanced some of the systems which were already there. Like, I'm not saying that they haven't done anything here. This is just Fallout 4 or Skyrim reskinned. No, it isn't. It totally isn't. Like, even the gunplay feels very different in this game than in, let's say, Fallout 4. Like, very different. But nonetheless, I would have hoped they're improving on some of the systems they had in the game. You know? And that is my overarching disappointment I had with the game. Like, too many of the old systems, which I would have really loved to see being changed, were not changed. Okay, so that sounds disappointing, Mo. What are you enjoying about this game? Well, you know, you enjoy the things I would say you were enjoying in every Bethesda game. Exploration is a huge deal, even though it seems like, and I will not go into detail here, but New Game Plus exists, as we know, which is already pretty weird for a Bethesda game. But apparently the New Game Plus is very important and very different. And apparently it focuses a little bit more on the exploration part. I know what it entails. I will not mention it. But it really seems like this time Bethesda wants you that you were finishing the main story. And then a New Game Plus is basically where the sandbox begins. So, yeah, I'm contemplating to actually push the main story so far, and then check out like all the other things, right? Like the exploration stuff. So we have to see about that. But exploration is definitely a huge part. I love that you can customize your ship, that there's so many different ships. I love all of the perks. Like it seems like this time Bethesda really thought hard about what the perks should be. I would not showcase the perks here because I did choose not to spoiler anything. Like I know that some people want to go in blind and they don't want to know anything about the perks and all the other stuff, so we are not going there. This is the only thing you will see if you're watching the video here. The blue sky and New Atlantis in the bag. That's what you are getting, and my kind of sad looking character. Weird. But seriously, the perks are really well thought out. There are tons of perks I want, and I want them now. And you have to make some tough decisions on what are the perks you want. Which is relatively new for a Bethesda game. Like when you were looking back at Fallout 4, there were a lot of perks where you just looked at it and you were like, yeah, okay, it's rather gimmicky, or if I'm not running this specific build, when would I ever utilize that? Right? So this time there is definitely a lot of perks where I'm just going like, oh my god, I want this. Why can I not get this? And also that you now have to do some like special stuff to upgrade your perks. That's also pretty neat. I first thought, oh no, they're going the Battlefield route here and they are making you do something completely stupid, right? But that isn't the case. Like there are some perks where you just have to kill a certain amount of enemies with a melee weapon, right? Or you have to run around with at least 75% of your inventory space for like a kilometer. And then you are getting the next level. Like it's nothing outrageous, and most of the time it just happens when you are utilizing the perk. And then you are slowly upgrading it. So that makes sense. There's also no level cap this time, which is really important. So technically speaking, at some point, you can learn every ability, every perk, which is kind of neat. And like in general, I enjoy what they did with the perk system. I do enjoy the weapon upgrade system, that you can really deck out your weapons, and I think it feels much better than it does in Fallout 4. Like much, much better. It's also more fitting. Like in Fallout 4, it's kind of crazy how Bethesda managed this. But in Fallout 4, right, when you are upgrading your weapons and all that, it's mostly this, take some junk, make it more junky. Wait, that sounds weird. Just slap some more junk on it, and for whatever reason, that weapon will become stronger. Right? It's like, okay, so I have this very long metal pipe here. If I'm now slapping that on my AK I found, then the damage will be increased by 30%. I was like, huh? What? Right? That's Fallout 4 in a nutshell, so to speak. And in this game, it makes sense. Like all the upgrades you do make all sense. They look nice. and it feels really good. What doesn't feel good, and I have to say, this is the first shortcoming this game definitely has, is melee. Unfortunately, your melee weapons feel sluggish. They all have the same attack speed. Yes, a small dagger is attacking as fast as like a big like cleaver sword. As like, well, you cannot upgrade them, you cannot mod them, and it feels like melee is an afterthought. Now you might say, well, Mo, it's the year 2330, you are still running around with a saber, lol. Thanks for that argument, but they put it in the game. If they would have decided to say, sorry, no melee here, besides of your boot knife for emergency moments, right? This is why we decided not to have that in. Cool. But they have perks, they have tons of different melee weapons, they have different like legendary perks and whatnot. Like, again, the melee system exists, and it exists because Bethesda wanted it to be there, but it is lackluster in comparison to all the others. I get it. They didn't want to go the Fallout route, right? They didn't want to put a mini flamethrower on your axe to give it fire damage or something stupid like that. I get that. But I think there would have been ways to make melee weapons more interesting, like different alloys, like you're starting out with an iron axe and then it becomes a titanium axe or something like that, right? Like, there would have been ways to actually put improvements into the game, and they decided not to. And I'm really disappointed by that. The same goes for sneaking. I wanted to do a sneaking build, and sneaking feels kind of useless in this game. You're being found far too quickly when you're sneaking around. And yes, I am 2 levels into sneaking, and people still see me a mile away. Even if I'm in the shadows, they see me with just 1 bar, right? And it's this, wait, how do you see me? There is barely a bar left on the visibility scale, right? It bothers me to no end, and I kind of stopped a little bit to do the sneaking, but yeah, it's a bit unfortunate. I still wonder, like, if you can find some extra outfit later on which will make it easier for you to just sneak around in the game, right? So we have to see about that. What else? Inventory. Do we have to talk about the inventory? Yes, I think we have to talk about the inventory, because let's be honest here, the inventory is the typical Bethesda bullshit. It's so mind-boggling to me how Bethesda is still clinging to this completely outdated inventory, which is hard to navigate. Like, even if you are on console, I think this is the worst inventory they ever had. And some stuff doesn't make any sense when it comes like to inventory things. Some stuff just doesn't make any sense. Like the lockpicks. Do you know where Bethesda is storing the lockpicks? Under junk. Yes, the lockpicks are under junk. And I'm like, what? I have seen content creators who didn't notice that, who didn't know what a digipick is because they didn't really read through it too much, and they were selling all their junk, and they were selling their lockpicks. And it's those kind of moments where I'm just completely flabbergasted by some of the decision and the inventory system they have implemented, and I hope there will be mods which will fix the inventory quickly. But to be honest, they basically need a new interface. Like, some of the mod creators has to be an interface UI UX designer and has to actually make it snappy, because right now the interface is it's horrid. Speaking of items, another huge problem this game has is item description. item description in this game is as useless as it gets. I found a weapon which says does more damage the lower your armor is. And I'm like, oh, okay. How much damage do we talk about? How much armor do we talk about? Can I get some information? And the game is like, Why? Or I found a melee weapon which has a perk, consecutive attacks increase the damage of a weapon. By how much? You have to test it. And at least, it's 10%, by the way. And at least you can figure that out relatively simple with the consecutive attack. But with the Berserker perk, where they're not telling you how much damage you do depending on how much armor you have and all that, it is so much harder to figure out. And they have this with a lot of perks. You look at a lot of perks and you're like, huh? The same goes when you are choosing your background. At the beginning, you have to choose your background, and depending on which background you choose, you have different like special answers, which sometimes are popping up in discussions, right? But you're also getting three free talents with the background. They're not telling you what those talents are. They give you pilot, ballistic, and healthy. And then they have a little bit of a flavor text underneath it, but that's it. They're not telling you what this perk does in particular. You basically have to start a game, you have to look at all the perks, and then you can see, that's what's going on here. Also, you don't really see all your stats, you don't know what the stats are doing. Like, why are you hiding this? And I know people might say at this point, but Mo, they did the same thing in Fallout, they did the same thing in Skyrim. Yeah, exactly. That's not an excuse. It makes it even worse. Fix that. And the information is there. That's the crazy part. We know that because there are mods for Skyrim and for Fallout, which are actually giving you all the stats when you are downloading those mods. And the modders have explained multiple times they haven't done anything. They just told the mod to actually read all the information which are there and display them. So Bethesda, over all those years, has always just decided to not display those information, even though they are there. I was like, okay, Bethesda, I get it. You don't want to overwhelm the people immediately when they are looking at an item, but please, like, put a button there I can just push, and then it shows up, like, all the information. Like, AC6 actually does that, right? Like, Armored Core 6 is doing that, right? Like, they allow you to just take a look at the stats, and if you want to have the details, well, then you can just push a button and you get all the information, right? But there are so many small things which I would have just expected from Bethesda to finally fix in the newest game. Right? And they don't. And it's really unfortunate. It really is. So there are a lot of things which will hopefully be patched. Maybe we are getting them fixed through DLCs. Like Bethesda has already talked about how they want to release much more content for Starfield than the previous Bethesda games. They were not going into detail, but they made it very clear that this time they're aiming at, yes, we want more updates in our game, And we just want to support our game for so much longer. So, yeah, that will happen. And I'm really curious about the mods. I know there are already mods out there, even though the modding tools are not even available yet. But people already found out that the whole, like how you inject data and how you inject like mods into the games is already there. So they have already figured that out, which is pretty neat. It's the same system like in Fallout, and it's the same system in Skyrim, and people were like, "Oh, it's the same thing. Okay, cool. So we can just do our thing here, right?" And again, I'm hoping that Bethesda really is like fixing their shortcomings, but I doubt that a bit, because if they wanted to fix this, right, they could have just they just could have fixed it with the game coming out, right? They had 7 years to do that, but they decided not to. So it's this, where is that going at some point, right? So yeah, we have to see about that. But again, I enjoy the game. I've been playing since Friday. I put in 10 hours a day playing this game, streaming this game, making content for this game. And it's not like because, oh, it's the next big thing, I'm feeling forced to do this, but because I'm really, really enjoying my time. And I said this yesterday on stream. I think that Bethesda did a better job with the cities than CDPR did with Cyberpunk. Why did I make that decision? Because some of the cities look a little bit closer to what Cyberpunk feels like, right? Like, especially New Atlantis is pretty big. Like, Bethesda didn't lie when they said New Atlantis is the biggest city they have ever created. And I would go so far to say that, yes, with content. Like, it's not just fluff. It's not just open areas where you have nothing to do, but there's actually tons of content here, right? There are tons of missions you can do, tons of side quests, and it feels like basically all the Skyrim cities combined into one. That's what it feels like. And I like that. Like, again, I think they did a great job. I think they did a great job with the world design, as always. Like, Bethesda is pretty good in that. They have a very interesting world story. I'm not talking about the main quest. I'm not talking about, like, story quests or anything. I'm talking literally about the story they are telling by you exploring worlds and looking around, meeting NPCs, taking a look at cities and outposts. And Bethesda has been doing an absolutely amazing job again at displaying that in the game. And it fits great. So another thing I want to explain, at least in this episode, is so a lot of people had the question of, okay, how does all the random stuff work? Is it No Man's Sky? No. No, it's not. It's not No Man's Sky. It's very different. So what they're doing is the main hubs and the main, let's say, story areas are all not random. They're created by hand, and you will experience the same thing everyone else is experiencing when playing Starfield. So if you're going into an area where there is like a fixed quest, or like the main quest is leading you there, then yes, you will have the same experience like everyone else has. It's as simple as that. So where's the randomness coming in? Everything else. The moment you are landing somewhere which is not preordained, it's completely random what you can find there. Minerals, animals, like enemies, secrets, items. Like everything is completely random when you are going to an area which is not like pre-designed. So if you're landing somewhere on the planet, it's completely random. And that's pretty cool, right? So most of the time when you are going somewhere and you are just exploring, which you are doing a lot, right? That is completely random. Nobody else will experience that. Well, the chances of nobody else's experience that is probably 1 in a million. And the same goes with the items, the same goes with the encounters, the same goes with the enemies, right? So I think that's pretty cool for watching other streamers. Like, I have been watching other streamers, and I've been watching other streamers and content creators who actually have been ahead of me, but who are doing side exploration, who are doing side stuff. And I know that they have been to some of the parts of the game I have already been to, right? Completely different. Completely different. Not the main stuff. That's always the same. But everything else is random. And that's super cool. So you could basically argue that you have an infinite amount of things to explore. You will never run out of stuff to explore in this game. Will it be sometimes repetitive? Yeah. There are a lot of outposts there. There are lots and lots of outposts. Like, there is repetitiveness there. Yeah, absolutely. But you could argue it was the same thing in Skyrim. You could argue it was the same thing in Fallout. But you could run out of it. This time, you basically can't. Like, we have already visited like a lot of random places, and we are 20 hours in, and we maybe have checked out 3 tiles on the planet. Like, I haven't even fully finished a whole planet to explore because it would just take so much insane amount of time, right? But what I have to say, and this is another complaint I really have, and I have to say, wow. Like, you know, when people asked if we have vehicles, and Bethesda was basically like, yeah, nah, you don't need vehicles. Vehicles. It's not necessary. Oh, we freaking do need vehicles. Like, whoever the modder is who will put vehicles in first will be the hero. Because exploring takes a freaking long time. Like, running from one outpost to another takes you like 5 minutes of walking every time. And it's this, what the hell, man? Like, who really thought that exploring is not, or like vehicles are not necessary? Like, even if you have like a little scooter, it's insane how much there is walking with nothing happens. Like, when you are running from one outpost to another and they're like a kilometer apart, you could argue, okay, this is the first time, there's a lot of stuff to scan, and you want to do the scanning, right? So that kind of feels like, yeah, all right, I can do that. But after you have done this, you don't need to do the scanning anymore, and it's just running. And no, you can't just fly to that point, right? So, I think the biggest problem this game has. And they kind of try to downplay it, and I find it actually a little bit insulting to how much they try to play down No Man's Sky. It's not No Man's Sky. Yeah, No Man's Sky is doing everything random, and you cannot really compare it. And it's like, no. Like, sure, the randomness, like No Man's Sky is really doing everything random. But even that is not entirely true. There are some limits there. And No Man's Sky exists. They have found a way around technical limitations, because people are always arguing like, yeah, there are a lot of limitations there, you cannot just do that. Well, apparently No Man's Sky found a way around it and people don't notice it, so it doesn't really matter. Right? As long as they are finding a way around those technical limitations and make it work, people don't really matter how they did it. It's the same argument with DLSS or FSR or whatever, right? When people are saying like, yeah, it's not true 4K, it's upscaled. Yeah, but if I'm not seeing the difference, then why should it matter to me? And it also costs me less resources, right? Like, why would it matter to me in the end? So it's the same thing with No Man's Sky. I think that's the worst thing which could have happened. That No Man's Sky exists, and it actually became really, really good. Do I say that No Man's Sky is the better Starfield? No. No Man's Sky is the sandbox, while Starfield is sandbox-esque. They're also a sandbox, but they have some restrictions there. And I'm kind of glad that those restrictions exist. Like, the reality is I am getting lost in No Man's Sky, and I feel like I don't really have a purpose. And No Man's Sky is now at the point in its life cycle where I try to go back into the game, and I always failed after a few hours. It never wanted to click with me. Like, Starfield is definitely more on the RPG level, you know. And let's not forget, there's one thing: Starfield will do better than No Man's Sky, and that's modding. And I tell you, I know people say this so often, and I'm so annoyed by it myself, but the moment mods will become available for this game, I think we will see the true potential. And if Bethesda is doing it right this time on how they are distributing mods, and it doesn't become a churn like it does in the previous Bethesda games. Like, I know now everyone with 1,000 hours of experience will come out of their holes and will be like, oh, modding is totally easy for Bethesda games. No, it's not. I made a video on it and explained why it isn't. For newcomers, modding in Bethesda games, if you're not going through the official channels, is a nightmare for a beginner. There are so many things which just can go wrong. So if Bethesda is doing it right this time, and they make it relatively easy for you to grab a mod and just roll with it, cool. Right? Then they win. But we have to see about that. Like, there are a lot of ways on how to improve their modding from previous Bethesda games. But it's the same hope I had they do with this game. Right? I'm really disappointed on how many systems, old systems in the game, Bethesda didn't upgrade. And it would have been great if they would have done that. They did not. oh, so Starfield is not the second coming of Jesus? No, it isn't. I I hated that this was like the topic basically before the release, right? Like, oh my god, Starfield will become the greatest game of all time, and this is it. This is the hit. And I was like, folks, we're talking about a Bethesda game here. Like, Bethesda games are always great, they are always fun, and you can have hundreds and hundreds of hours out of it. And people love it, but it's never this, as I say, the second coming of Jesus. Like Skyrim. Man, I played Skyrim, what was it? A year ago? Yeah, about a year ago. And it's alright. It's a Bethesda game. Sure, with the mods, again, you can make it great. But the base game? Poof. Fallout, same thing. The games are good. And again, 100 hours of gameplay just waiting for you. But they're not an unproblematic masterpiece. And they don't have to be. I don't think they have to be. I still get my enjoyment out of them. I still enjoy playing them. And that's really the only thing which matters. Like, people are sometimes far too often focused on, is it a 9 out of 10? A 9.5 out of 10? How will this do on Metacritic in comparison to Spider-Man? And why is this dude in-game talking to me the whole time? Could you please leave me alone? Thank you. Weird. It's just like people are focusing too much on the Metacritic. Like, I saw people like updating Metacritic the whole time and be like, oh my god, it's only a 78 out of like 100. Worst game of all time. Especially Sony people. Like, the whole console war bullshit. It's so annoying. It's kind of funny. I saw some people, I actually had a laugh at that. I will only jump on this quickly and then we are wrapping it up here because we are already doing like a 42-minute podcast. Sorry for that. But we had a lot to talk about, right? But I saw this and I really laughed my ass off. People are looking for Metacritic scores and they see that this game is like, what is it, an 87 right now on Metacritic or something like that, and people are like, not even a 90. Oh boy, Sony again wins. Best game of all time, huh? And I'm like, dude, one of the best games Sony has ever made, or people at least consider it one of the best games Sony has ever made, has only an 83 on Metacritic. The game? Ghost of Tsushima. Yes, Ghost of Tsushima has only an 83 Metacritic. Think about that for a second. That tells you everything you have to know about like Metacritic. And yeah, it's like, as somebody who has done reviews, is still doing reviews now with more thoughts, the one thing people have to understand is that the people who are reviewing video games, they're not following a code. They're not following like a certain checklist and only go after this checklist everyone agrees on. No, the people who are reviewing games are people like you and me who have to say something about it, know how to put this and articulate that into words or writing, and put it out there. That's the only difference. Like, as somebody who grew up with reading magazines about reviewers and just being like, oh my god, wow, that reviewer, wow, that's amazing what he is doing. Oh my god, probably took so much work. And it's like, it takes work, right? But now that I've been doing reviewing in writing form and video form over 10 years, it's not something too special. Again, I think the most important part is to articulate your opinion. And when you can do that in coherent sentences and make it sense, everyone can do a review. Sorry, reviewer colleagues. Like, reviewing is not a special job. And so too many people are building their opinion on the opinion of a random person who has not like special knowledge about something, who is not even like following a code or something like that. Like, you will like a game, you will not like a game. And there will be aspects of a game you like in particular, you hate in particular. And somebody else, somewhere around the world, will say the total opposite. It's just that. It's not right, it's not wrong. It doesn't make a game better or worse. It's just different opinions. Of course, when we're talking about technical aspects, that's something completely different. Like, something works as it should be, or it doesn't. Then it becomes a problem, right? But when it comes to like gameplay aspects, story, writing, and all that, it's always like everyone has their own opinion there. Like, look at me. I found, like, I watched Avengers like a year ago, like the whole Avengers thing for the first time. God, was that middling. Like, what the hell? I found all those like movies so middling at best. And people love them because they love Marvel, they love the characters, they grew up with those characters. I have a friend of mine who played through Metal Gear Solid. God, they found it horrible. The writing, the characters, it was cringy at best. And for me, it's like one of the best games ever made, right? It's like, it's opinions. Don't get too hung up on it, right? Like, a game I have hundreds of hours in is Evil Genius. I have hundreds of hours in Evil Genius. And I think Evil Genius back in the day got like a 70 or something, middle 70s. And I was super upset about that. Till I realized why. I have already 100 hours into this game. Now it's 200, now it's 300. Did the review take anything away from the fun I have with this game? Nah. So don't get hung up on the reviews. But let's wrap this podcast up, because man, this was nearly 50 minutes of the first like real deep dive into Starfield. We will definitely come back next week on Monday with a new episode, and then we will go probably over like more things I found out. I don't want to go into specific yet. I don't have any plans to talk about the specifics of Starfield yet, because there's so much to discover, so many things to just figure out. And I say it's perfect time to end the podcast here. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to leave a like. Also, if you're new to the channel, you want to see more, well, of Mole in Space, or you want to see more videos on Starfield, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate that. And with that said, I will see you next time. Stay safe and bye-bye. Yeah, let's get a coffee.